This is part 2 of our Roots recap. If you haven't watched our other recap, you should go watch it. But you don't need to watch the first part to understand this one. Basically, it's a multi-generational story of an enslaved family. The first part focused on Kunta Kinte's struggle to escape a harsh life. Eventually, he fell in love with Belle, and they had a child named Kizzy together. Unfortunately, Kizzy was caught learning to read and write, so she was sold to Tom Leah. Tom Lee had raped Kizzy multiple times, then she gave birth to her son, George. Let's continue. Years later, Tom still takes advantage of Kizzy, and she feels empty. She cleans herself of the disgusting man's mayonnaise BO. Meanwhile, her son George, all grown up, tries to pet a rooster, and Mingo gets upset with him. Tom storms into Kizzy's quarters and gets upset about the chickens. However, he decides to bring the kid to a rooster fight. On their way there, Tom lies to George saying his dad left years ago. Meanwhile, Kizzy secretly teaches Patricia how to read. When Tom comes in with George, Kizzy is upset that George is going to be dealing with the chickens now. Then Tom mocks Patricia for not being able to have children. 12 years later, George drives Tom and Patricia to church. While the white people listen to the sermons indoors, Reverend Lyon preaches outdoors. However, George is mocking him, and Matilda gets upset with him for mocking her dad. George tries to woo her, but she says her daddy picks her suitors. Just as he says he's not scared of her daddy, Reverend Lyon appears behind him. George kisses her and nopes the fuck out. Back at the farm, George wants to train the birds to fly higher. Mingo says no, it's dumb, but George goes ahead anyway. At one of the fights, Tom's bird loses, and he's livid. A free man named Marcellus approaches George. He's the next opponent. Says he bought his papers 3 years ago. He's free, owns his birds, keeps the winnings. Okay, but Marcellus fine. Before the fight, George hypes up the crowd. Someone yells, "Chicken George!" And soon the entire place is chanting it. George throws his bird into the air, and the crowd gasps. Afterwards, Mr. Jewett, with his bleached eyebrows, tries to buy George. But Tom insists he's not for sale. Then Jewett invites Tom to dine with him for the Easter picnic. Tom's thrilled to finally be included. Later, George tries to introduce his mom to Matilda and the Reverend, but she asks, how could a god allow slavery? And when slavery ends, she'll be at church every Sunday. Easter rolls around. Jewett motions the lays over, which irks Mr. Bird and his wife. George plays matchmaker and introduces Marcellus to Kizzy. Marcellus says a real man should treat his woman right and should respect a woman's mind. "Miss Kizzy girl, you better grab your mans." Meanwhile, at the table, Bird indirectly calls Tom stupid. Tom finally snaps and smashes Bird's big back face, so Bird challenges him to a duel. The men trade gunfire in a brutal shootout. A bullet tears Mr. Big Backery's cheeks, and Tom gets shot in his masturbating hand, but neither yields, so they draw swords. Tom's losing steam fast, but George yells him back into the fight. He rallies and Bird finally surrenders, dignity leaking faster than his blood. Days later, during recovery, Tom tells George his pep talk kept him strong, then urges him to make him rich so he can rise too. George shares his plan to save up and buy his freedom. Tom promises that when the time comes, he will set George free. George and Matilda get married and Tom watches the festivities. Marcellus and Kizzy are now together. Tom tells George he owes him a year's worth of salary for buying Matilda, and their first son must be named Tom. It's all good with George, but Kizzy says there is power in naming. However, he doesn't understand Tom was the one who raped her. One day, Marcellus and Kizzy are lying in bed after enjoying each other. Tom bursts in, drunk, and says Kizzy is his property. Marcellus offers $2,000 for Kizzy. That night, Tom throws a tantrum, whining that he's been good to Kizzy and she still wants to leave. Kizzy fires back. She's not leaving her family with him, and if he touches George and Matilda's kids, she'll kill him. Tom almost sharts himself, but Kizzy says hurry and be quick about it. After Kizzy leaves Tom's in distress, George sees what happened and is furious. The next day, Kizzy tells Marcellus he needs to move on and find someone new because she has to stay to protect George. Distraught, she asks Kunta Kinte to help her. 3 years later, they arrive in Greensville and learn there's a slave revolt. Someone throws bird cages off the wagon, looking for weapons. Mingo tries to stop him and gets beaten up. They immediately head home, but at a roadblock, Tom gets scolded for not chaining George. So Tom orders George to chain himself to the wagon. Back home, Tom reunites with Patricia, and his plantation is burning down from the revolt. Reverend Lyon rushes over and says Kizzy and Matilda are missing. George frees himself and tells Mingo he'll be back soon. But it's already dark when he finds Kizzy and Matilda. When they return to the house, Mingo is gone. George is devastated and wants to kill Tom, but Kizzy gets him to calm down, saying Kunta always said there's a time to fight, but first we must survive. Much later, when Matilda gives birth to their 4th child, Kizzy insists they name it Tom. George is still mad about Tom and refuses, but Kizzy says Tom might retaliate if they don't. Matilda agrees, but only if they raise the baby to the stars, so they do. 4 years later, George and Tom go to Charleston for a rooster fight, where Mr. Jewett introduces them to Sir Eric from England. his sideburns looking like a parenthesis. If you gotta be ugly, best to be creative about it. Sir Eric suggests raising the stakes and Tom wagers $10,000 plus side bets. George later points out Tom doesn't have that kind of money. Tom says it doesn't matter if they win. Also, he'll set George free. While George is preparing, Tom flashes him the papers as motivation, and after a brutal fight, they win. George is free. Sir Eric asks for a rematch. Tom gets cocky and doubles the wager. Sir Eric leads Jewett away and shows him a rooster bred from a line that's fought for kings. No surprise, it wins. They were hustled hard. Tom has lost everything, but Sir Eric makes an offer. Hand George over and consider the debt settled. He's taking George to England to train his birds and handlers. George says he's not going anywhere. He's a free man. Tom points out that technically, no, the papers still have to be registered, but he promises to have them ready when George returns. George is dragged away and shackled, and his entire family flashes before his eyes. Years and years have passed. The English love him and call him Chicken George. 20 years later, Sir Eric finally sends George home a free man. A year before the Civil War, he strolls up to Tom's farm and is greeted by not much. An old woman leads him to Kizzy's grave. He takes a moment to grieve before going indoors to confront Tom. He's furious to learn that Tom sold his family. Tom, on the other hand, whines about how George got to live the good life in England while his own life became a crumbling mess, like his skin. George doesn't stick around for the pity party. He heads out to the Murray farm to find his family. Overseer Toomey stops him, and Frederick Murray comes to investigate. Benjamin Murray tells Matilda to take his wife inside, and George spots her. He calls to her, and she tells everyone he's her husband. Benjamin checks his papers. Turns out George is free. But that doesn't stop Frederick from being an asshole. He gives Matilda permission to see George after the workday. Until then, George is graciously allowed to wait by the road. At long last, George and Matilda reunite, and y'all, this is so heartbreaking. It made me cry. That night, after making love, they go at it again and again. The next morning, George is greeted by all his kids and even his grandkids. Tom's partner, Irene, proudly tells George that Benjamin says Tom's the best blacksmith in Carolina and rents him out across the state. Tom's rolling in money, saving up to buy their freedom. George promises to keep the rest of the family together this time. Back at the house, Frederick's fiancée, Nancy Holt, reads aloud Frederick's open letter in the newspaper, calling for North Carolina to secede. Benjamin thinks secession is a bit much, but Nancy backs Frederick, saying slavery is the backbone of the South. I hope a vampire bites you, Nancy. Later, George and Ashford watch Benjamin run tests for the army. Tom eventually shows up and gives George the cold shoulder. He resents him for not being around and blames his gambling for all the family's woes. One night, James overhears Frederick plotting. According to North Carolina law, a freed slave must leave within 90 days. Since George has already overstayed his welcome by 2 months, Frederick can seize and sell him on the 91st day. James warns the family and Matilda insists George leave ASAP. He reluctantly agrees and swears he'll return to free her. Next day, George meets Cyrus, a runaway slave who's heard that black men can reach a Union fort, get a gun, fight, and you can have whatever you like. So George tags along. Meanwhile, Nancy inspects Tom's wares but isn't impressed. Tom offers to show her more in his wagon. She follows him and tells her slave, Jerusalem, to keep an eye out for Frederick. Tom's surprised since Jerusalem is deaf and mute. Nancy says he can read lips. Oh, and there's spies for the North who need Tom's help. But Tom's not keen on risking his neck for them. Oh, I take that back about Nancy. We like her now. Soon after, war is declared and Nancy wishes her fiancé goodbye, but we know she wishes the man dies so she can get a better dick down. The Murray plantation gets repurposed into a Confederate encampment. Meanwhile, George is chased by soldiers and manages to kill them and get away. One night, Tom's heading home when he hears screams. Toomey tries to stop him, but he pushes on and finds 4 men assaulting Irene. The next day, Tom meets with Nancy. She tells him Major Merritt is passing through with vital plans. They need to intercept him. Tom asks what he's supposed to do. Jerusalem pipes up, not deaf or mute after all, and says they need to kill Merritt and take the plans north. After last night, Tom agrees to help. He suggests using hand charges he has access to. And early the next morning, he and Jerusalem wait in the woods. Shortly after Merritt and his men leave the house, Nancy looks out and sees Frederick approaching. Benjamin tells him he's just missed Merritt, so he chases after him. Merritt and his men gallop down the road and Tom throws the grenade. After a shootout, the 3 are killed, but Jerusalem is injured. He rides off with the plans just as Frederick arrives, and Tom hides in a tree. Later that day, Frederick leads Nancy out to unveil a surprise. It's Jerusalem. They know she's helping out the slaves. They've found her letters and notes on their troop movements. Frederick orders the men to lynch Jerusalem. In a last-ditch effort, Nancy tells Frederick this may be his chance to save his soul. Benjamin begs him to just send her to Richmond and let the authorities handle her. but Frederick demands she rat out someone else to earn that trip. Tom is nervous he'll be exposed, but Nancy says she acted alone. Frederick decides to hang Jerusalem, but Nancy steals his gun and shoots Jerusalem in the head to put him out of his misery. Frederick, pissed at her defiance, decides to hang her, and she dies as well. Damn. At Fort Pillow, the Rebs close in and the Union surrenders. They start executing every black soldier in sight. George and Cyrus bolt, and Cyrus takes a bullet for George. Later, George has to saw off his arm to prevent infection from spreading. Headlines soon declare one Union victory after another. One morning, everyone heads to the house and finds it abandoned. General Lee has surrendered. The war is over, and so is slavery. Benjamin shows up with a deal for the Quintes. Work the land and get a chicken and a hog. He's also willing to rent them farmland and cabins. Tom says they'll think it over. Then Cyrus shows up and tells the family he's friends with George. That night, Cyrus tells the Quintes about his adventures with George and how George went off to help a church fight against bushwhackers. He shows them George's hat as proof, and Matilda asks Tom to find him and bring him home. 2 weeks later, Tom spots a mandingo warrior and chases him until he vanishes. Then he sees a burned church in the clearing. George is sitting outside, injured. Tom helps him up and hands him his hat. Then they head home. Sometime later, Matilda spots George and Tom in the distance, and the family rushes out for a group hug. The next day, Tom tells Benjamin they're leaving. Benjamin is fine with it, but Frederick butts in again, saying he won't ever see them become his equal. Why Frederick looked greasy and dry at the same time? Frederick pulls out a gun, but George fires first. Benjamin is a little sad about his son, but oh well. The family heads out. That night, Tom takes his baby from Irene, and George follows him towards a clearing. Tom tells the baby she's his first child not born into slavery, and while she'll have to fight every day to stay free, he's going to teach her their story so she can become who she needs to be. Then he raises her to the stars. As a descendant of the Quintes, Alex writes about the legacy of Kunta Quintes, the legacy of everyone. He hopes his work has brought pride to Kunta Kinte and everyone involved. That's the end of the Root story, a heartbreaking but beautiful multi-generational story. The amount of times I cried, y'all. What did you guys think of this one?
Hey, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe now and turn on the notification because YouTube isn't recommending my videos. And if you'd like to watch more foolishness, click here or here.